My name is Catherine Carlock. I'm the real estate and development reporter at the Boston Globe. And we are here this morning to talk about downtown Boston with a really fabulous panel. We also have, here we go, here's our third panelist. There is perhaps no neighborhood that has seen more drastic change than downtown as a result of the COVID-19 pandemic, with the way we work, the way we live, the way we play, the way we eat. So we are here today to talk through some of the very real challenges that COVID has presented for downtown, but also some of the very real opportunities. So I'm gonna let each of my panelists introduce themselves and then we'll get started. Nia, why don't we start with you?
All right, good morning. My name is Mia Grace. I am I'm a restaurateur, proprietor of Daryl's Corner Bar and Kitchen, the Underground Cafe, and most newly, the Grace by Nia Supper Club on the Seaport. I'm a Boston resident and super happy to be here and talk about this very important topic.
Hi, everybody. My name is Kristen Blount. I work for a company called Colliers International, and I am a leasing advisor. I primarily work with tenants or companies that are looking for office space, whether they are searching for it or renewing their space or doing anything to do with their real estate. That's my primary job.
And hi, everyone. I wish I was with you all today in person, but my name is Michael Nichols. I am the president of the Downtown Boston Business Improvement District. We partner with the city of Boston in the management of the 34-block 100-acre area that comprises downtown Crossing, most of the financial district, along with the theater district and government center. Pleased to be here.
Well, Michael, we're sorry you can't be here in person, but I think there's no better way to show really practically how our lives have changed since COVID started. I think if we had done this 5 years ago, we wouldn't have been able to have a hybrid experience like this. So I thought that was a nice little transition. All right, to get things started. Last week, Mayor Michelle Wu was speaking to a group of business leaders and said, "The rhythms of our city and economy are returning. Boston's recovery is going strong. The city feels more alive." And I would like to hear from each of you. Do you agree? Give us a status update on downtown for each of your industries.
You want to start? You want me to start?
I would love you to start, just to maybe get some of the bad news out of the way first.
All right. All right, so let's start with the bad news. The Boston market, we track about 70 million square feet of space in the Boston market. As of the end of the second quarter, we had the highest vacancy on record. So we were over 20%. And we had the highest sublease space available on record. And we've had that combined with a significant decline in demand from a tenant standpoint. So just as a matter of speaking, we generally track about 5 million square feet of tenants looking for space in the market, whether it's renewing, relocating, coming in from out of other places. That's down by about 40%. So we've got the convergence of all these things. And everybody knows that office has been a little bit challenging. It's been challenging to get people back into the office. So here's the good news, though. The stats are not looking good, but they are looking better. It definitely feels more alive in the city, and that might be because fall is a big tourist time for us. A lot of our students are back in the city again, so things are really starting to buzz a little bit in the city. And you hear all this bad news, but there are good things happening in the city. So for example, Lego is relocating its headquarters here to Boston. We're still seeing growth from other places in the country. So the life sciences sector through COVID really kept us in our industry very much alive. That's leveled off right now, but there are good stories in the market as well.
All right, Nia, what about you?
Well, I think when I think about where we are in terms of essentially when we want to grow, right, as a business. In the middle of COVID, I started my second venture, where most people were still kind of closing down. It was really bold to say, well, we want to do another unit, and how are we going to figure that part out? And so I would say even while we were still kind of with restrictions, we started to think about a third space. And so when you're talking about, is the city more alive? I think so, but I think it's because of this kind of innovation. We've got Michael with us right now remotely, but it's one of those things where we started to think outside the box of just traditional, for my industry, traditional dining, right? And so it was no longer just your steakhouse or just your seafood restaurant. It was more about experiences. And I think that is something that my concepts has always had, was that it was more than just a dining out. It was a full experience. We were mixing art and culture and music. And I think that more than just what we've done indoors, we decided that we want to do that outside too. And I think Michael can speak more to that in terms of activating space outside of the traditional norm for us.
Michael?
Yeah, I totally agree. Certainly to the mayor's question, or point, it is more alive, right? I mean, it's unquestionably, I think, the most alive it's been in Boston since March of 2020 and before. And the same is true for the downtown. We're on 29 straight months of year-over-year growth in foot traffic, comparing the same month this year to the same month a year ago. We've had the largest office lease of the year anywhere in Boston being signed in downtown. We're having a number of sort of active conversations about office to residential conversions. We have more restaurants open now today in the bid district in downtown than we did before the pandemic, over 150 people. So that's one industry in particular that has piled back into the downtown and is giving a reason to visit. And we have 20 or 25% less retail vacancy in the downtown than we did a year ago. And so I've said to many, I think the retail sector bottomed out maybe a year and a half ago, long before I think the office market continues to have its uncertainty, as Kristen noted. But we're seeing all the signs of people coming back, and none of that's to say that the tourists aren't back, who really are themselves. I think we're seeing tourist numbers that rival, the before times, if you will. And so our hotels had a really phenomenal first quarter this year. Usually the quietest in Boston. January, February, March is the hardest time to convince someone to come to Boston. But our hotels were delighted at how well they did this past winter. And so I think there's a lot of really positive harbingers for where we are today versus where we were a year ago and 2 years ago.
Sure. So a lot to deal with, a lot of challenges, but also a lot of opportunity. And Nia, you said, I think, a really important word, experience. Often when we're hearing companies that want to come back, they say, I need to give my workers an experience. I need to give people something to come back for. And for all of you, where have you seen experiences that have done well in terms of wanting to bring people back, revitalizing maybe some empty corridors of downtown? I mean, you're doing live music. How does that generate an experience that gets people to say, okay, I'm either going to get in my car, I'm going to walk, I'm going to take transit, if it's working, to get downtown and to do something that I couldn't do just on a computer screen?
Yeah, I mean, with live music being the center of our establishment, I dare to say that there's no one else who really does it the same way that we do it in the Seaport, if in downtown Boston at all. And that is something that really kind of speaks to all. My thing about when we talk about culture and people and bringing folks together, it's around food, and to me it's around music. And it's something that now you've got offices who will say, let's go have that happy hour at, across the street at Grace. And that's great because they know that it has more than just the drinking aspect or the eating aspect and kind of the mingling, but now they get a full sensory experience, right? And so I think that when offices and people in general who are activating these spaces, they just want more than what's typical. I think one of the things that is great, and it even helps our business, is when I see open lots, parking lots that still haven't been developed, and they may have development plans, but I see my landlord taking that moment to say, well, how do we activate this space, right? Can we do open air market while we have no problem walking into stores? It's so great to see them take containers and transform them into open market space and then put up the pop-up tents. And now you've got people who are intentionally downtown during great weather who are like, well, what do we do after we shop? Well, we then start to look at these different towers and retail spaces that we can go to after. And so I think that we're always looking for something non-traditional at this point. You know, we've got really kind of, I would say, almost bored a little bit, sitting at home and wondering, we were contemplating so much about what our day-to-days look like that now we're like, we don't want that anymore. And so how can I make my shopping experience and my dining out experience and just my overall time in the city much more different than it was before? I'm trying to live to the fullest. So.
Yeah, I'm not putting on high heels when I'm working from home, so this is the big day today. Kristen, when you're talking with tenants and companies, how have those conversations changed for what they're looking for now versus maybe from a year ago, from the depths of COVID, from before COVID?
So two things. One, the stats are showing that there's a real movement toward Class A space. So that's probably...
So help, for those of us who aren't commercial real estate geeks like myself, what is Class A space?
So Class A space is the towers. They have amenities, they have security, they have nearby parking. So the stats are showing that they are performing better than Class B space. Why is that? A couple of things. One, people want to make sure that they are breathing safe air, and it doesn't mean that Class B buildings aren't safe. It's just there's a perception that these institutionally owned buildings, they feel better. Two, companies are trying to make their offices magnets versus mandates. I think the other thing that the studies are starting to show is that we are more productive when there's some face-to-face level that we have, you know, with companies. And so companies are saying, we got to get people in at least 3 days a week. I don't think we're ever going to go back really, truly to a 5-day work week. And so people are looking for places that have great amenities, whether it's conference centers down to, I think one of the great examples is the Winthrop Tower, which Millennium Partners is just finishing up this year. They are coming online almost 100% leased, 1 Congress Street, which is, you know, Car Properties and Tom O'Brien, HYM. They're 100% leased. What those buildings offer is they've got places for collaboration. They've got places where people can sit and have drinks together. They have a place where you can drop off, you know, your dog at doggy daycare. You got adult daycare, child daycare, all these other things that, you know, that we need and that we want right now in order to get us all into the office.
Mm-hmm. I like that magnet versus mandate. And so, yes, 1 Congress, the beautiful new State Street Tower just opened, Winthrop Center also opening, but those companies that are moving to those towers have also left big empty spaces where they were before. And I think that increasing bifurcation almost between the Class A versus some of the other space is something that I'm really paying attention to, and I think will be something that really shows how downtown Boston recovers in future. And Michael, a lot of those Class B offices that have been throughout COVID maybe a little bit less in demand, a lot of those are in downtown Crossing. And you mentioned office to residential conversion before, so I'm curious your thoughts on what's the realistic possibility of actually having a downtown office tower convert into a residential apartment or condo building?
Yeah, I think it's highly realistic. I think we'll be hearing announcements in the months ahead about buildings that'll take that plunge. Not every building.
First, right? Yeah.
That's right. That can be an exclusive. So it's certainly the case that that's going to happen. But it doesn't happen overnight, which is why we haven't heard announcements yet. And frankly, it won't be a fit for even most of the troubled buildings, right? And so the downtown certainly has our legacy building stock. You know, many things on offer in Back Bay and Fenway and Seaport are much newer. And so the complications are more significant in downtown for converting a building. But there are some candidates. And I think there are both a number of existing owners right now who are studying that issue and trying to make the math pencil. But there are also kind of, and I just heard this in the last week or so, there are non-owners of buildings downtown who are beginning to kick the tires on acquiring a building in the downtown Crossing area for the exclusive purpose of a conversion. So somebody who knows how to do it, who's been successful with a conversion in another area, who is scouting for that opportunity, particularly in light of the city's tax abatement associated with incentivizing a conversion. So we will, I think, in the months ahead, hear announcements in this area. And it will be important. It will meaningfully take down the amount of office space on offer in downtown and the vacancy rates, and it will bring more units of housing. We're up to 6,000 units of housing, which is significantly more than we had a little over 10 years ago in downtown Crossing and the financial district area. It will only be a positive trend to continue to bring people downtown to live and work and shop and do all the things that someone does when they live in an area.
I want to just chime in on that, if you don't mind, Michael. Of
course.
I don't know if I turn around and look at you, see me, and do I see you? I don't know. Anyway, you and I got the chance to talk earlier this week, and I really feel like some of the work that your organization, that you and your team are doing, are going to have some significant impact on that need for amenity space. So landlords that can't do it, if you can locate in places where some of those things are provided, venues like NIA offers, or some of the work that you guys are doing, I want to see, and I have a lot of hope that that's going to change the landscape a little bit of some of those buildings that you just mentioned.
Yeah, well, that's actually one of the big pivots we're making right now. Is our organization used to serve who was already in downtown, right? So we had the type of music and programming that catered to if you happened to already be in downtown, you might enjoy it. We are moving that entirely to destination-worthy programming, destination-worthy art. So if you live elsewhere in the city, or if you have a desk downtown that you're not sure if you're going to go to that day, or if you live in the suburbs, what are the types of dining offerings, of retail offerings, of programming, block parties and festivals, of one-time events, or of public art, which we've been relatively quiet, I think, over time with exhibits of contemporary art downtown. All of those tools, I think our organization is moving our operations into supporting on a much more broad basis to give people a reason to visit downtown where you will feel like you missed something if you weren't there. And we're pretty excited about where that work is headed.
Yeah, well, and I mean, to that point, again, experience, destination, wanting it to be something that is not just the standard, come in, sit in your office, and go home. And when we look at downtown, though, my colleague Janelle Nanos and I wrote a few months ago a story about Boston's 3 downtowns. We call it, the Financial District and Downtown Crossing, Back Bay, and the Seaport. So, Nia Grace, I gotta ask you, do you consider Seaport part of downtown, or is it a separate downtown? What's your definition?
Well, it's definitely a part of downtown, and I like how it actually connected the financial district, the Greenway, to the waterfront portion of it. It's very seamless for me to take the train, Orange Line, end up in downtown Crossing, and then make that walk over to the Seaport, and it feels really good. So for me personally, I consider it a part of downtown, but the Seaport is special. I can't lie about it.
Well, but when you look at the recovery on the retail side, especially, there's a lot less emptiness in the Seaport than there is in downtown. But then again, there's a lot fewer spaces in the Seaport that were left to be empty in the first place. So, Michael, how do you see some of the downtown retail spaces? I know the city has just announced the federal space program, which is, hang on, I have it. It's an acronym, y'all. It's Supporting Pandemic-Affected Community Enterprises, which is federal ARPA funding to support bringing in small businesses into empty storefronts. How do you see government-supported work like that helping bring back some livelihood into downtown retail spaces?
Yeah, that's going to help in a big way. I mean, it's a $9 million program making grants up to $200,000 for first or second time entrepreneurs to open a new storefront in downtown. If anyone listening is interested, they should call our organization because the next application period opens up October 2nd. And we want to fill those vacant storefronts. This is a particular bright spot of our work over the last year. We had 90 to 100 vacant storefronts in our district a year ago, and that's down to something like 75 now. And so there is an interest in operating a storefront in downtown and being a part of the swing back into what our new normal will become. 2 of those are space grantees. And so within just the last 2 weeks, we had the first 2 space grantees from the first cohort sign leases to operate retail space downtown. One's a furniture company and the other is a a skincare company and a beauty spa that appeals to Black and brown communities. And so these aren't the type of businesses we saw in downtown before. And so what we're also seeing is a commitment to, I think, local organic companies who would be more recession proof, and have deeper roots in the community rather than the 9th location of a Chipotle or the 10th Tate or the 11th Sweet Green, things that could fold up shop easily when things get tough. We need more Nias downtown rather than more Chipotles, I would say. And so we're looking for the local companies who want to establish roots here, and the government support has been meaningful. Chief Idowu's office and the Office of Opportunity and Inclusion are providing business technical assistance to companies looking to locate in downtown and beyond, and I think that's meaningful support in addition to the dollars. And so I think that program has really been uplifting for the downtown and will be even more so. There were 24 grantees in the first cohort. At least half, 12, are looking specifically at downtown office space right now. And so we've been taking them on tours for the last several weeks, and we think we'll have more good news to come out of that program.
One thing that is interesting about the space program is that it's not a lot, but it might be just enough to kind of help push over the line. And that kind of creative deal making when it comes to how companies, how tenants get into spaces, you didn't see too much of that before COVID, maybe? Kristen, I can't. The number of times we talked about one company for a 10-year lease, and that was kind of it. But Nia, you've spoken about the creativity needed to get in some of these companies. So I'm curious from all three of you, how have you seen examples, or what are some examples you've seen of some of the creativity that comes into making a lease happen to actually bring some more life, to turn the lights on in places where they were dark?
Yeah, so I would say, in addition to infusions of dollars that might come from the government or private grants, when we're talking to landlords now, it's no longer, them with essentially all of the weight, right? It actually, you need retailers, you need operators to be and occupy these spaces. And so they're not just putting out a 5 or 10 or 20-year lease. They're actually getting creative and thoughtful about it and said, well, if you are a budding business and this might be your new commercial space, let me give you something that could be a little bit more manageable. Let me start talking to you about 1, 2, and 3-year leases. In addition to, money that you might bring to the table, they're offering those tenant improvement dollars. Those are really significant in a business operating.
So what is a tenant improvement dollar, and how does that work?
Yeah, this is a landlord essentially reinvesting in their space and in their property. Most of the time, it's the burden of the tenant to come in and build out and furnish and do all of those things, right? But at the end of the day, if the tenant happens to leave at the end of a lease, they leave everything that has been improved in that building, and that's towards the landlord's benefit. And so landlords are realizing, or whatever the situation is, it's a benefit to them to also kind of put their own skin in the game to say, I want you to be a retailer here. I want you to be successful here. And so let me show you how I can help. I can say specifically when it came to opening Grace by Nia, the place had never been made for music in the first place, right? And so we're talking about decibel levels, and we're talking about how many people are going to come in, and the space had no ceiling before, for real, right? It was one that was almost a lobby, and
who needs a ceiling?
Yeah, but it opened out to the lobby, and then we knew that we had tenants upstairs, and so we really had to be thoughtful about, is this going to work? And the landlord, in fact, wanted, and that's WS Development, they wanted that activation in that particular tower, and they knew it would be a great part of the ecosystem. And they said, well, we don't just want it, but we're going to put some money where our mouth is, and we're going to figure out how we do the sound attenuation together and how we build this out together so they can be successful. And I think that has been the biggest shift. I would say the same thing when we did the underground. That space had on Columbus Avenue, it's essentially off-campus housing for Northeastern University. It sat dormant for 3 years, couldn't be rented, and that was before the pandemic. And they just couldn't understand, what it was. And to that point, they thought maybe another Chipotle or another Tate, and it wasn't viable for those businesses or even kind of really wanted by the community. And they thought, well, why don't we get a community invested partner to build it out? And we've been there since 2021 and have had great success.
Mm-hmm. So 1 year deal, 2 year deal, 3 year deals, a lot of tenant improvement dollars. Kristen, That's not something that a lot of corporate tenants were wanting to involve themselves in before COVID. So how have you seen that shift when you're talking with companies? I mean, how are they figuring, okay, are they saying, I'm going to come in for a year, I'm going to come in for 2 years, I'll take a sublease space? What's going on in a corporate tenant's mind right now?
I think sort of in the heart of the pandemic, there was a lot more uncertainty than there is now. There's always uncertainty, but there was a lot more uncertainty. So we saw, from a sublease perspective, we saw the subleases, the number of subleases go up to an all-time high at the beginning of the pandemic, and then they went down to sort of a normal number. And that's because during that time, anybody that sort of had to move or had to do something wanted to do it in a lower risk environment. So while you don't get flexibility and things like that with a sublease, you do usually get a much lower rental rate, and you've got space that's ready. So,
and just to confirm, sublease is a space that's already been leased.
Leased, right. That's already been leased that the tenant no longer needs, so that the company that leases it no longer needs it. Typically, it's fit out or built out for their standards. So that's one extreme. I think things are sort of starting to turn around right now, but I think we all learned during the pandemic that flexibility is really important. So, companies they're organic, growing, shrinking, moving things. And so the ability to get bigger, get smaller, and sometimes that's what drives a shorter term. But most companies are really driven by sort of economics in general. The top line, the bottom line. What are we going to do to get maximum productivity from our people? How are we going to have the best scenario to attract talent, retain talent? But then the other piece is the bottom line. And so, when a company looks at its lease, it's sort of like a four-legged stool where it looks at, the base rental rate, how much TI, like Nia just explained, would be given to the company. What other concessions would there be? So, for example, we'll give you free rent for the next 10 years, you get 1 month free or something like that. And then the other piece is, how big is the space? And it all sort of comes into one big sort of cash flow. And so, most of them are driven by that. Before the pandemic, you didn't see concessions. You didn't see landlords saying, we're going to offer you a couple of months of free rent. But now, obviously, we're seeing that, and especially if landlords want to sell their buildings later, they have to retain base rents that are a certain limit. But I think what Nia said about creating ecosystems is what landlords are seeing right now. And I think, Catherine, you wrote about that recently. Maybe it's been in the last year, about how the ecosystems sort of perform better as assets and investments than than the buildings that are sort of standalone without looking at how does the whole picture work together.
Right. I think, Michael, how much of a downtown ecosystem, how much is that on your mind every day?
Every day, every minute, every day, right? We're trying to create an appealing community, and also fighting narratives that are trying to chip away at that, right? I think it's become in fashion nationally to hate on downtowns. And a lot has been said of downtowns that are struggling a lot more than Boston's, right? And San Francisco, kind of chief among them, have some peculiar, or I'd say particular, and in many cases peculiar problems that plague that city that just frankly don't line up with what we're seeing in Boston. And so in the day-to-day experience of managing downtown, we're having to both look to try and make this a compelling place and communicate it, but also counter narratives nationally that seem to also have fallen into our kind of polarized political climate about what really downtown is. And overwhelmingly, Boston's central business district and downtown is among the safest and cleanest in the country. And when people come, that's what we consistently hear from them. But there's some self-selection where if you read enough news articles about why downtown is not a compelling place to spend time or money or move your company or return to your desk, it certainly is running counter to the work that we're doing.
I think there is somewhat of an unfair perception of public safety. Crime stats do not back that up.
They don't.
But how do you fight to combat that stigma? To say, hey, this isn't fair, come downtown?
That's right. So we're working hard to identify different audiences of people and giving them the opportunity to activate downtown. Just about 2 or 3 weeks ago, we did a block party on Labor Day weekend with a local organizer who had not had much success getting access to downtown or public space in the past. He threw what ended up a 500-person block party catered to Black professionals, Black, 20 and 30 something professionals, and and had a phenomenal event. In the middle of a holiday weekend, drew a standing room only crowd to a very central and visible part of the downtown. The name of that event was Black Outside Block Party, and the point of it was to ensure that Black professionals and Black residents of the city and the region felt comfortable downtown, felt their own ownership of downtown. And the event was tremendously successful. We did a winter pop-up art gallery and event space in a vacant storefront downtown that was donated by a building owner who wanted to see activation of a vacant space. And so we catered art exhibits that would appeal to local residents with night events that would appeal primarily to Gen Z and young millennials who wanted somewhere to go and listen to live music and shop for goods and have a really terrific experience downtown. So I think we're trying to find the different audiences that might be interested in downtown and program towards them rather than trying to trot out events that we hope appeal to everybody. At the end of the day, I think we want to ensure that we're creating pipelines from communities who might be unseen and have them, enjoy downtown just the same that so many else do.
Well, and being creative, bringing in the pop-ups, making it something that can appeal to lots of different folks. That, as Nia was saying, the creativity that goes into that. I mean, it takes a lot of work. We've talked a lot about how things have changed over, since COVID and over the last year. And I know that we don't have crystal balls, but just to wrap up, I want to hear from each of you. This time next year, September 2024, we're back here for Globe Summit. We're downtown. Where do you see downtown this time next year?
I don't have the information about too much of your data, right, in terms of vacancies, but I definitely see that number is going to continue to drop from Mike, and it's going to be amazing for you. I personally, would love to see more spaces even like mine. I feel like it's, really culture centric, again, between the art, the music, and the actually kind of food that we are delivering. I think that's what I desire to see. So when I do go downtown, I don't think about the few options that I have, but I look at the more options that I have, right? And so I hope to see something going on for Hispanic Heritage Month next month in October too, right? And then what else can we continue to do that, really just continues to tack on the line of outside of the normal, so.
Kristen, what about you?
You know me, Catherine. I am an eternal optimist.
You're a real estate broker, so yeah.
I know, we can't, I know. And I think we're going to continue to see challenges in terms of, filling office space, getting people back into the office, getting some momentum. So that's the realistic part of me. But the dreamer part of me says that I think we're going to come out of the ashes. And I think we all learned a lot during COVID about how important it is that we all work together to create our community, and that we can do better things, and we can make our city a better place. We can start fresh in so many ways. So I'm optimistic.
Yeah, I agree with both Nia and Kristen, and I'd even take the question somewhere slightly different. I hope by next year we stop talking about 2019. Anybody who has the goal that we go back to where we were doesn't, I think, realize that that's never going to happen. We keep comparing our society to a totally different era that we will never be back to again. I think Kristen said earlier, we will never be back to 5-day-a-week office traffic dominantly, right? I mean, I think there's a new normal. And so I think we actually need to start talking a whole lot more about where we're going to be in 2025, 26, 2030, the 400th birthday of our city. A major milestone is coming up. There's going to be a new Boston that emerges out of this. And I think many cities are grappling with this. How do we measure ourselves against where we were before? And I think by next year, we should be pretty comfortable, hopefully in our own skin, measuring where we are now. There's a lot of really good work happening. The city is becoming more interesting, more equitable. I think it will be filled, as Nia said, with culture and music and dining options that perhaps didn't find their footing in downtown before. But as we as we cultivate a younger and more diverse audience for downtown that reflects our majority minority city. I think it'll be a much better and more interesting time to be in Boston than perhaps where we were 5 years ago. And so I think we should all be excited about that, because I think that's the downtown we should be building towards, not comparing ourselves based on foot traffic statistics or otherwise to where we were 5 years ago. It will be different, but I think it will be better.
Yeah, I think that's a great place to leave things off. So if you'll join me in thanking our wonderful panelists today.
Thank you.